Moran, the Wolf Point Regional Small Business Development Center Director. We're here to talk about community resilience today. I am joined today by Grant Kier, President and CEO of the Missoula Economic Partnership, and Cassandra Sennell, Director of Marketing for Butte Local Development Corporation. Cassandra, can you share a bit about your background and role at BLDC with us?
Yeah, so I am technically their marketing and business development director for the Butte Local Development Corporation. We are an economic development organization that represents Butte Silver Bow. As well, we're in a joint venture with Headwaters RC&D and the Small Business Development Center that's here in Butte. We primarily are working with small businesses with Headwaters and the Small Business Development Center, but we also take a large role in the recruitment and retainment of businesses through the Butte Local Development Corporation. We also partner with the city, our chamber, our CVB, and our Montana Connections Business Development Park, which is our industrial park that's located at the port.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Grant, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Grant Kier. I'm the president and CEO of the Missoula Economic Partnership. My personal background, I've been here for a couple of years. Prior to this, I was running one of our larger conservation organizations that did regional conservation. I mention that because I think that work really lent itself to a lot of building collaboration around the region, and that was really helpful for us as we looked at how to address COVID and resiliency. Likewise, I think the origin story of our organization, Missoula Economic Partnership, is one that was maybe well suited to what we've been through in the past 7 or 8 months now. And the reason for that is that we were really formed in 2010, exactly a decade ago, in response to the economic recession of 2009 and 10. And our community realizing we weren't doing enough collectively to be organized in the public and private sectors in a unified way to really think about how we grew job opportunities and economic development opportunities in the community. So Missoula Economic Partnership was formed to really try to bring the public and private sectors together to really work collaboratively and to build stronger partnerships with some of the other entities that do similar work in our community.
Great. Thank you guys for joining us today. As we all saw in the videos, each of our regions utilize marketing campaigns to inspire our communities and lift up small businesses. In my region, we started a campaign called GNDC Local Challenge to encourage Northeastern Montana residents to support local businesses while practicing social distancing during the COVID pandemic. What are some of the ways that your community came together to create and support marketing campaigns?
Cassandra, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, all right. For us, what we had immediately started out of the gate with was getting some PSAs that was put out on the airwaves, put out through social media. The first important piece was that we were doing an education of what was happening, what the community needed to be doing to respond, and how we could support one another as a community. So whether that was we were going to be trying to push, delivery and takeout options with our restaurants to help our small businesses. If we were asking our community members to make sure that they were social distancing, masking up, using sanitizer, hand washing. And so that part was really important. We also had put together basically a glorified spreadsheet that allowed for people to know what was happening with businesses. So, if they were offering those options, if their hours had changed, if they were temporarily closed. And then we kind of followed that up with some of the feel-good pieces. We did some videos letting people know that they weren't in this alone, that our business leaders and economic development partners were really there, still supporting them, kind of behind the scenes, maybe just not seeing us, face to face anymore, but we were still there. We were working tirelessly to make sure that our community was going to come out of it very strong.
Awesome. And what were some of the reactions that you guys received to your campaigns?
Well, our approach was a little bit different. So we took, rather than sort of starting with a sort of public messaging campaign, we really tried to step back and take a collective group of organizations that we had already partnered with, our destination organization, our chamber, our downtown partnership, a few others who we consistently met with, partners out of the University of Montana, and really tried to take like a very strategic assessment of what was going on. We felt like in our community, we had some pretty strong and early leadership out of our health department and elected officials, and they did a really good job of a public campaign to convey sort of on the health side what was needed in terms of behavior and patients. So that gave us the room to really focus in on how our business is going to be impacted, and what might their needs be, and what might the gaps be in their understanding of how to get help to meet their needs. So we created a task force that was sort of seeded with that initial group of partners, and then expanded to, I think, over 32 organizations now that meet every 2 weeks. And basically, we used every organization with some guidance from a local economist out of the university to say, what can we anticipate for these financial impact to look like on our local businesses? Who are the businesses who are being most impacted and least supported in terms of things like the PPP programs coming out? It was pretty clear early on when those programs were delivered that there was a lot of advantage for bigger companies who already had lawyers and accountants and the teams of people who would really help them access those programs. So for us, we sort of took a look at the gaps in who would have access to those programs, and really tried to bring together the partners who would have the capacity to sort of reach out to smaller businesses in our community that had greater levels of uncertainty, probably more impact, and the least support to navigate those systems, and tried to create essentially some roadmaps for those organizations of the ways that they could start attacking their sort of business plans, to develop the case statements for themselves, to be able to go into any bank or lending institution who is qualified to deliver that relief, and access that relief in a way that gave the lender predictability that even though they didn't have a pre-existing relationship, it was a worthwhile bet on their part to spend time working with that business, and also to give the business confidence that there was a path they could follow to successfully get access to those programs, because a lot of smaller businesses felt pretty, I think, uncertain of how to navigate that process early on. So our communications was really focused on targeting businesses who were feeling uncertain about how to move forward. And we did that both with social media, but also just with the networks of those 30 organizations, of literally making phone calls to those businesses and finding out how they were doing, what they might need, and how we could support them.
Great. And as things have kind of progressed through the pandemic, how has the community evolved and the plans have changed? I know you said 32 people came together. That's pretty amazing. You don't often see a community be able to come together like that and implement such a huge process so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of pride in the group, in their ability and willingness to work together. A lot of people set aside their very specific missions to say, what are we hearing that we need, and how do we build these little pods of people to deliver a service that's needed with the right partners. And I think eventually it took us a while to get there, but we realized that even though the health department and our elected officials, for example, were delivering a good message about how important masks and social distance and maintaining a clean workplace were, there was still some uncertainty from the public about how to behave in a way that really supported businesses. So that's when we realized, as Cassandra's group did, there was a role for us to play to educate the public on how to be good customers, and how to support the employees that are in those workplaces that might be afraid of contracting the disease, and how to support other customers feeling comfortable going into places. So that's when, for example, we pulled together with our United Way and our Destination Missoula partners and developed something we call Safer Missoula, which is a partnership around essentially communications that were intended to build best practices in our own community before university students, for example, came back in the fall, so that there would be sort of strong norms built here by summertime, so that by fall, when students were coming, it was sort of obvious that everybody here is wearing masks. We expect you to wear a mask and go into a business, et cetera. And the response has been very positive. Our businesses are using the collateral material with stickers on their doors and little pamphlets on their tables or at the restaurants and things like that. And I think it's also just built a sense of collaboration amongst our peers that I think will make us a much more resilient community, not just in dealing with this disease as we go forward, but also in tackling bigger problems or other problems as we face them as a community.
And Cass, what are some of the things that BLDC has implemented throughout the pandemic?
As far as some more of the plans that we ended up doing, we had started a campaign that was called Believe in Butte, and that was just another piece of the encouragement. We were literally out on the streets at about 11:30 at night before the shelter in place, so that we could make sure that we were back in our homes and abiding the law. But we wanted the community to be able to wake up that next morning in a time of uncertainty, knowing that we were going to get through it together. Um, I think Grant really, kind of pointed out that the uncertainty was really evident with the businesses and the people that we were talking to, and they were so unsure of what was going to happen next. Our team was definitely on the receiving end of, getting an influx of calls and messages, and we were trying to present the information as we were finding out, whether that be about the idle loans or PPP. Um, but we also took a proactive step and worked with our city and our commissioners to uh, develop a program that we'd be able to help uh, provide some, assistance financially to some of our small businesses that were really needing to have more certainty during that time. We put together a survey that collected information so that we had a better understanding of how long those funds would help a business, and what kinds of businesses they were, and if it was to retain employees, if it was to help with overhead costs. A lot of the service industry was having these sunk costs in products that they weren't going to be able to use, whether it was beer that was going flat, or if it was produce that was going to rot. And so we were trying to better understand who needed that immediate help. And so we were able to use that information. We were able to go to our commissioners as well. We were able to go throughout the region and be able to present that information to other commissioners and community members. So we were able to get some funds out that were able to help. And that was definitely something that assisted businesses prior to or in conjunction with the PPP idle loans, and then eventually the funds that came from the state. Um, and so, we've got a little bit of both. We've got some of the financial piece, we've got the education, we've also got some of the feel good of just, people want to know that, our neighbors, our employees, our friends, our family, our community members are kind of arm in arm and linking to one another and making sure that we're all going to succeed coming out of this.
Right. One of the first things that we did in the region as well was determine a survey and send it out to determine needs to make an impactful plan. But now, 7 months later, things are progressing differently. Where do you see your organizations going? Are you changing the plan? Are you getting creative? Tell me a little bit.
For us, pivoting has been a daily occurrence. Even from a tourism standpoint, when we had come out with, you know, videos, originally we actually had a video that we were going to use already to push out tourism into the region. And, we had meetings, it was going to be part international, national. And by the time we got closer, it was, well, national is probably better. And then we said, but maybe not these states that were hot spots. And, as it continued to progress, we had to shrink that circle smaller and smaller. As well, we ended up having to cut a lot of the content that was in it, showing groups of people. Butte is the festival city, and we could not show any of the festivals that we boast about and wanted to be able to share. But the surveys certainly help. It allows for us to better understand. We're digging into analytics anywhere we can get it. Who is interested in Butte, whether it's to come visit. Are you looking to produce a film here? Are you looking to move a manufacturing facility here? We're generally really trying to understand our statistics so that we're still in a strong position to be able to recruit businesses or recruit workforce or recruit tourism in a safe manner.
I know Butte is an event hotspot center. So has there been any creative events that you guys have hosted instead of the traditional ones? I know St. Patrick's Day is a big one there. Were you able to pivot and bring something different to the community?
There was still some activities that did happen that they were virtual. Unfortunately with the folk festival, that's probably our biggest driver of economic activity during summer. But it's just so hard when you're not able to do that face to face in person. I believe that NPR did play some of the past music festivals. So if you still want to listen to it, but as far as the festivals go, we weren't super successful in trying to do drive up, concerts or anything like that quite yet. We were able to, be creative in other ways, just, doing a lot more of the virtual, which we are doing right now.
I think it's interesting. One of the things that has come back in our community after all these years is drive up movie theaters, and people seem to be well attended. So, out of this pandemic, it'll be interesting to see the new businesses that develop and stick with us, right? So, Grant, can you tell us a little bit about how your plan had to evolve and maybe how you guys got creative?
Yeah, I guess I feel like calling anything we've done a plan for the last 8 months is generous, to be honest. I mean, I think in the early days, it was just life support, right? We were, nobody knew what was going to happen next or what this all meant. And it was about information gathering and resource dissemination. And the more we could learn about what was available to help businesses and what they needed, we were just exchanging information and trying to figure out where gaps existed and how to sort of serve them with whatever resources we could bring to the table. And I think that was like an hourly cycle of just like gap analysis, what industry is suffering, who needs what's changing in Congress with respect to packages, what's happening at the state for support, what phases are we in. It just felt literally hour to hour that we were trying to figure out how to be as helpful as possible. And by we, I mean that entire task force. And I think if anything's changed is that the cycle of that assessment is maybe grown to be more of like one over a week or two period instead of hourly. But I still feel like, and even today, as we're having this conversation and our community is reporting record cases of COVID, I feel like in some ways, I think admittedly, we've all kind of grown into thinking that we know what this normal looks like. And I think it's been really helpful for us as an organization to pause even over the last couple of weeks and realize, okay, as the season's changing and the caseloads are rising again and our hospitals are hitting capacity, we can't ever get out of that cycle of what are the needs and how do we meet them and what does this mean for our community. And a great example that we were just so proud to be a part of was in the first sort of week of things taking shape, our local hospitals that were running tests were running out of test supplies, and in particular the viral test media, where they basically store the swab when it goes from your nose to the testing facility. And one of our hospital's CEOs, who's a board member of mine, just called me up one evening sort of late at night and said, honestly, we're going to stop being able to test people within 10 days if we don't figure out how to get this much needed supply. Can you help? We don't know where else to go. And so we were able to use sort of the biotech community around Missoula and reach out to a few folks who manufacture various materials for the biosciences and biotech industries and find a vendor, Rocky Mountain Bio, who was able, because they had just been acquired by a Korean company, they suddenly had this huge national, international network of supply chain. And they were like, hey, let's see what we can do to figure out, one, how to even make this thing. And if we can get the supplies, we know they're all in short demand, there's a lot of places that are short on these supplies right now. But within 24 hours, they were on the phone with both of our hospitals. They were looking at recipes for how to build this product that were approved by the FDA for emergency use. And within 7 days, they had developed enough product to not only serve our hospitals, but all of the hospitals in Montana if they ran out. And what we found was true then, and I think helps us sort of be confident moving forward, is there has not been a single person who didn't want to help any way they could. And whether it's the private sector figuring out how to pivot and be creative with the way that they deploy their skills and capacity and resources, or the community trying to figure out how to support each other and get through this sort of through morale and emotional support. We've just found that every step of the way, we've been able to admit we don't have a long-term plan because the conditions are changing so fast. But what we have is people who are willing to sit down and come up with creative solutions and be responsive as fast as we possibly can to address whatever is coming up. And I think that's, coming back to that theme of resilience, I think that's what's built a level of confidence and in fact, like pride even in our community right now to say we can meet these challenges, and it's not going to be perfect and we're not going to know what's going to happen every step of the way. But I think if we keep communicating and we keep identifying where we have needs, we can kind of navigate one step at a time to get through this.
Right. One of the things you said is your plan changes day to day. I totally agree with that. I heard somebody say it's been like drinking from a fire hose. And I totally agree with that quote. And so what we would see up here is we would try to push information out through newspaper. And by the time that the newspaper article was actually printed, it would be different. So we really had to turn to social media. So how did social media play a role in bringing communities together during the shelter in place, and how has it remained an important tool?
I guess.
Grant, why don't you start?
Okay. Um, so here in Missoula, one of the things that we did is we realized that social media would be an important tool. Um, One of the ways that I'll admit I am not the most savvy social media person, but one of the things that we realized is that people were both hungry for information, but sort of human contact, right? And when we were in isolation, like just the emotional toll of feeling disconnected from the community was really hard on people. So one of the tools we used early on was a podcast, and we developed a partnership with Justin Angle at the University of Montana, who's got a regular podcast called A New Angle. And we asked him if he would consider doing a weekly podcast focused on COVID that would help us sort of talk about what we're learning and what we're seeing and what resources exist to help. And so one of my partners, Susan Haypatrick, who's our County United Way CEO, and I partnered with Justin and local economist Bryce Ward, who kind of helped guide our task force on a lot of the sort of fundamental principles of what we might expect economically. Started this podcast on a weekly basis, and it gave us a little like longer form to sort of share ideas, but I think it also just gave us a place to express the level of uncertainty we were feeling, the level of sort of sadness we were feeling about sort of seeing this, what felt like amazing lives that we live in Montana every day, sort of slipping away and not knowing where they were going. And I think that media really helped us, because as soon as that came out, we were able to share it across the community, get the word out that that podcast was up. And we just had a ton of positive feedback that people really valued the sort of honest expression of what we were going through, but also the information of what resources were available, who was doing what in the community. Because our typical social networks had broken down, that we weren't seeing each other at the grocery store every day or down at the bar or at the restaurants. And so the ways that we typically share a lot of information in Missoula weren't there. And this gave people just a way to feel like they were reconnecting again with the broader community. I think was really powerful.
I would say, definitely very similar. I think at the heart of your basic human needs with survival and food and shelter is that human connection. And one of the videos we did were some of our community members, and whether it was our CEO of St. James Hospital or economic development partners or the head of our chamber, we actually just asked them to create a little video of themselves giving a few words of encouragement. And even for myself, putting that piece together, at the end of the day, it still made me so teary-eyed. It has been so long since I've seen those people and, would see them every week, whether it was in the store or we were in meetings or anything. Butte is a very small town. And so, it really was just so encouraging to see them at this different level and to kind of see them in this different light of, they were at home having to do this virtually, which I was doing the same thing. I really felt like there was this empathetic way that we were starting to talk to one another that we hadn't really before. And so I think it definitely just changed our tone and the way that we started really developing more conversations. The other piece is, getting that information out immediately. I do spend a lot of time on social media, sadly. I hate to admit that, but it is just such an instant way for us to get information out. Whether it was going to be, grants or financial programs, or we were going to do a community call, or we were just trying to get some information out that the from a federal level or state level or regional level, we were just trying to get that information out as fast as we possibly could. And then with the businesses, we started a Facebook group that was Small Businesses of Butte. Again, they were able to get information out right away, whether it was a new business, which we did have new businesses throughout all of this that started, small businesses that started retail shops or restaurants or bakeries. But we wanted the community to rally around them and to support them. We had businesses that changed their business model, that maybe had a model where it was buffet style, that they couldn't do that anymore. So they were going to change to a food truck, or they were going to offer delivery, or they were going to do some sort of sale that was happening. And so we did have a couple of retail shops that partnered together. They decided that they were going to do a Mother's Day sale, and they did like a Facebook Live and showed these baskets that you could purchase, and then they would deliver them to you within a matter of hours. And I just thought that that was such a creative way of using social media and being able to get that immediate audience and get that information out and support their business. So there were a lot of advantages of having social media. Had we been in the same spot 20 years ago, I don't know how effective we would have been at being able to support the small businesses or the large businesses or healthcare providers by getting that education, information, and the constant barrage of updates that we have out to our community members.
Thank you. What is some advice you could offer communities who are trying to build up their community's resilience?
My advice and experience in going through this is think really broadly about who can be a partner in the process and who you can engage in helping. I think if we've learned anything, it's that especially under times of sort of great stress, people are willing to be pretty creative with how they deploy their resources to be helpful, and people desperately want to be a part of the solution. And I think one of the things we learned in that podcast and early on with the task force was just people were just wanted so badly to find a way to be helpful to the community. And I think the more time we spent trying to think about giving people opportunities to put their skills to work, the better our community was for it. And I think it's really easy sometimes, especially under those conditions, you have to move fast. And sometimes it's hard to move fast when you're trying to move with a big group of people. But I think it really helped us sort of at each moment to pause and say, we know we need to get this done, but who else can we include in the solution, so that we're dispersing the burden and the load of all of the work, but also inviting everybody to participate to whatever level they can to be helpful. To me, that was the most exceptional part of this, was just how ready everybody was to help and how creative everybody was to use their strengths in ways they probably never imagined trying to use them to sort of be a part of whatever solution they could develop at the time for the need that the community had.
Montana is pretty amazing. Our people are the best, I would say. What about you, Cass?
This is probably something that's probably just developed through the course of this. But while we've become more accustomed to, asking within our own community, whether it's an economic development partner partnering with another economic development agency, or a small business reaching out and asking for help. I honestly think that our communities should reach out to other communities. I should be reaching out to Grant and having more conversations about what they're doing with the task force as we're developing that plan and seeing what their successes and challenges have been. I know that we have definitely used inspiration, I'll call it, from both of your communities for Butte, as well from other states and other countries even. And so I think as we start to maybe lift a little higher out of what's presently right in front of us, having a little bit more of those broad conversations across the state and seeing what we're all doing that's successful, or some of the trials that we may have learned. And so maybe that's just a challenge to each of us that are here and anyone that's watching, that we have more of those discussions so that we can continue to make it through this next phase and make sure that we're all coming out of this as a unified state in a very productive, healthy, and prosperous way.
So Cassandra, I think that's a great point. And I think one of the things that I noticed in this process is, and I think you're making that point actually reminds me of this. So many leaders were so focused on just how to get their own organization, their own institution, their own community through this. And that seemed true, frankly, at every scale, whether it was a small business owner, somebody running an organization like ours, to our mayors, and even to some extent our governor, right? We just had to deal with the trees. There's very little time for us to step back and look at the forest. And I think it's your comments are a great reminder that sort of our best way to be resilient is to be resilient together across the state, and to really think about sort of what are we learning together and how do we sort of come together in those lessons and really explore how to sort of use the strengths of the entire state. And Shandy, I'm especially particular about sort of lessons that you guys learned in a smaller community, and how those can benefit us in Missoula, and sort of what we can take away from what you've gone through.
Right. So as the SBDC director, I serve 7 counties up here in northeastern Montana. And I would definitely agree with Cass's statement. We had to take a look at it from a regional community perspective versus an individual county perspective to be able to help serve such a vast region being so underpopulated. And one of our main industries had not been prospering going into COVID. So agriculture really was suffering prior to COVID. So that did not help whatsoever. Um, but one suggestion that I would definitely have for everybody is to engage all those community members who are willing to help in any way possible. The more that they're engaged, the more you can get them into your communities, buying in, right? Shopping local instead of going out of town, keeping the dollar circulating within your region versus, maybe going to North Dakota, since it's just kind of a hop, skip. And at one point, Canada was still open. So we really wanted to try and see what our community needed. And that survey was really impactful because people were very specific with us in their requests. It was anonymous, but so they could feel like they could tell us whatever they needed to tell us. And we saw a huge response, and it was so vast, but we were able to really sit down and make a impactful plan, and target our time because we're so small. GNDC only has 7 staff members, so 7 staff members trying to deal with everything from small business to housing, and housing saw such a problem as well. And community development, we had all these things playing together, and everybody just going 100 miles an hour. So it was really nice to see these responses and be able to take a step back and say, okay, let's focus our time better, how the community thinks this would be more helpful. And then the road from there just really became quite clear, that we needed to, from my perspective, we needed to help our businesses pivot. We needed to look at their business plans and reevaluate. Maybe some business models were not going to work anymore, but we saw people come out with completely different businesses, which is amazing. It just shows how resilient our entrepreneurs and our community is. Well, I really appreciate you guys joining us today. And we really appreciate all the hard work you guys do. You guys are rock stars. I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys continue through the pandemic, in your communities.